One of the most important traits of HR professionals and companies is that the one tasked with finding the right talent for the company. And the onus is on the recruiter and the HR professionals to find and retain this talent. Now, in the age of remote work, in the age of AI, what new thing can we do differently? What new processes can we implement? And what new trends are happening in the realm of hiring? So, to handle this first section, we have Dr. Michael Ogu to take a session on data driven hiring. I think that makes sense. Yes, data driven hiring. So, please join me to welcome, please. Let's put a round of applause for Dr. Michael Ogu. If for those of us who were at the keynote session, it delivered a very, very wonderful keynote. And if you missed this, don't worry, we're going to be uploading it on YouTube. So thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. Good morning, everyone. Okay, so how are we doing this morning? Okay, so we're going to make this session interactive. Can I have the people at that table come this way so that I don't go beyond? The ACs, you're running from the ACs. Wow. Okay, so we want to talk about data-driven hiring. First, are we all HR practitioners here? Not everyone. Who is not a HR practitioner here? Okay. All right, so I'll lean on my HR practitioners. We'll make it interactive. Okay, so when we hear the word data-driven hiring, what comes to mind? Is there any other mic, or I'll give them my mic to speak? Tell me your name and what comes to mind.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tayo. I'm the HR manager for PricePally.com. So when we talk about data-driven hiring, right, what comes to mind is making use of what you see in terms of maybe their CV, in terms of what they put out there as their personal branding for your recruitment process.
Okay, so you've mentioned data elements. All right, those are data elements. Using data elements to make hiring decisions. What else? Shaki, let's hear you. What's data-driven hiring?
Good morning, everyone. So I think
Sure.
data-driven hiring, to my own understanding, I don't know, I might be wrong, but I think it has to do with having to make use of, say, historical data about why you need to fill a particular role. So you'll be looking at, so for instance, if you want to fill a sales role, you'll be looking at how much are we generating, how many people do we need
Exactly.
to generate a particular amount of money or revenue. Then based on that, you'll be able to determine how many people you need for that particular role.
Yes. Thank you so much, Shaki. Who else would like to share data-driven hiring?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nena, and I believe data-driven hiring is hiring with somewhat precision by using
Precision, accuracy.
Yes, accuracy, using specific data to draw insights, and then using those data to also have like a sense of predictive analytics or analysis. Thank you.
All right. So, data-driven hiring is a strategic process of using data and insights to make the right hiring decisions. Let me take that again. It's a strategic process of using what? Data and insights from that data to make the right hiring decisions. In HR, there's something we call PURE. Previously undetected recruitment error. You can prevent PURE when you use data in your hiring process. Are we together? So it's all about ensuring that you are making the right hiring decisions. It's all about what? Ensuring that you are making the right hiring decisions with data and the insights you can gather from that data. Now, I often say that when we have data does three things for us. Data does what? Three things for us. First, there are stories in data. I hope you know there are stories. There are stories in your data set. There are stories. Your data tells a story. All right. Secondly, there are insights in your data set. And then there are patterns of behavior and patterns of trends. So we call them patterns of what? Trends and behaviors. Your data tells a pattern. It tells a what? It tells a pattern. Your data also has insights, and then your data tells stories. So it is using the insights, the patterns, and the stories from those data sets to make the right hiring decisions. So it's the process, it involves collecting, analyzing, and using data from all aspects of the hiring process, from identifying candidates to making offers. So let's look at the hiring process. What are the things in the hiring process? Let's look at it. What are those things in the hiring process? What do we do when we want to hire? We craft a job description. What else? We do an advert. What else? Then job profiling. Then we screen. Then we do shortlist. Then we do interviews. After interviews, then selection. Then you make an offer to the best candidate. You can use data to enhance all these things that I've mentioned. You can use what? Data to enhance all those things that I've mentioned. So that's what data-driven hiring is all about. That's what data-driven hiring is all about. But before I talk about data-driven hiring, let me talk about some fundamentals first. I will not just jump into data-driven hiring. We need to look at measures, metrics, and analytics, because you need to understand them. So that when I say what is cost per hire, you need to know whether it's a measure or it's a metric. All right? And then when I say, okay, you know what? What's been the cost per hire year on year or quarter on quarter over the last 2 years? I'm not asking you to give me analytics insights. So a measure is a quantitative value used to describe something. It's a what? It's a value, a quantitative value used to describe something. So take, for instance, number of customers. It's a measure. It's a what? It's a measure. Number of employees. It's also a measure. Website traffic. Number of visitors to your website. It's a measure. If I now say number of visitors per quarter, that becomes a metric. So measures are quantitative values that can be used to describe something. And I've given examples, all right? They can be used to track changes over time or compare different things or make predictions. That's a measure. Now, what is a metric? What's a metric? A metric is a combination of two or more measures. So it's a calculated value derived from one or more measures. For example, employee turnover rate, cost per employee, revenue per employee, net promoter score, conversion rate, they are all what? Metrics. So let me use an example to break it down. If you take revenue per employee, it's a metric. It's the total revenue in a year or in a given period of time. Let me not restrict it to a year. Total revenue in a given period of time divided by the total number of employees. Those are two measures. Total revenue is a measure. Total number of employees is a measure. So when I have two measures combined together, it gives us a what? It gives us a metric. It gives us a what? A metric. And there are metrics that you will need to track. We'll talk about them if you are going to make the right hiring decisions. Like I said, in your data sets, there are three elements. Can you remember what I said in your data sets? Your data set tells a what? Tells a story. There are insights and there are patterns. There are patterns. If you work with data a lot, you'll see that you can see patterns on your data. You can get insights from your data, and your data tells a story. A few weeks ago, I was studying some data set where I work, and immediately the pattern of behavior jumped at me. Just by looking at the data. I'd not even investigated it. Just by looking, I could see the consistent pattern. So you have measures and you have metrics. You have measures. Then you also have analytics. Analytics are insights you get from either your measures or your metrics. All right? So let me tie the three together so that I can show you how they are all connected together. Now take for instance, let's use our website traffic as our case study. Your number of visitors to your website is a measure, right? Number of visitors to the website is a measure. So take for instance, in January you had 500 visitors. In March you had 1,000 visitors. In April you had 1,500 visitors. That's a measure, right? But I hope you know that there are also insights from just that measure alone. There has been a significant increase month on month in the number of visitors. You can tell a story. But that's fine. If we now say, okay, let's talk about the bounce rates, which will now be number of visitors who leave after visiting one page. So take, for instance, you have 8 pages on your website. And so you know what? After the first visit, after the first page, people leave. Maybe 20 visitors left. Then maybe you say, okay, 10 visitors left after visiting the second page. Maybe it's a 4-page website. 5 people left after. You can have your bounce rates for each page. Are we together? And then if I now want to say analytics, analyzing the word bounce rates of different website pages to identify where we can improve. So take, for instance, on your landing page, you had 500 people leave after visiting page 1. Then it reduced to 400 after visiting page 2. Then it reduced to 350 after visiting page 3. Where do you think they need to do work on? Page 1, 2, or 3? Page 1. They need to do a lot of work on page 1. So analytics is all about getting insights from your data. It's about what? Getting insights from your data. And all of these 3 concepts are important in decision making, particularly when we now want to narrow down to the hiring process. They are very important. So the difference between measures, metrics, and analytics is that measures are the raw data. Metrics are calculated values derived from measures. And then analytics is the process of interpreting and analyzing the data to gain insights. And like I said, there are stories, insights, and patterns in your data set. So take, for instance, you are looking at turnover rate of employees per department. And then after doing your distribution spread for that quarter, for example, let's say quarter 3 that just passed. And maybe in your organization you have 4 departments. I'm just using that as an hypothetical example. And then you had 50% attrition from tech, 20% attrition from corporate services, 10% attrition from customer service, and then the balance from engineering. If you were investigating the data, which of the departments will give you a lot of concern? Technology, why? Because the attrition rate is what? Is higher. Am I making sense? So your data set, it's either telling you a story or it's showing you patterns or you are mining insights from your data. If we now do a quarter upon quarter comparison to further get more insights, and then you say quarter 2 upon quarter 3, tech now jumped from 25% to 50%, it will give you more concern because you now had an increase. You now begin to ask yourself questions, what is triggering people to leave tech? It will now generate curiosity. Could it be the line manager? Could it be the working environment? Could it be that it's toxic? Could it be that there's micromanagement and all of that? Those insights will force you to drill down, to begin to ask more questions. So there are stories, insights, and patterns in our data sets. We just need to pay attention to them. That's why linear analysis of data is not only it's important, but it's not enough. You need to do comparative analysis. When we say linear analysis, you are looking the data within one singular time period and one subset. When you do a comparative analysis, you are now looking at the data on multiple time periods and multiple data sets. And these are things that we need to become comfortable with as HR practitioners. So if you are looking at, for example, rejection rates as a hiring metric, for example, which is the total number of employees who reject your offer letter after the entire process. And then all of a sudden, you looked at your rejection rates in quarter 2. It was higher compared to quarter 1. You need to investigate. If you now drill further, you now say, okay, let's look at the rejection rate per department. And then you had more rejection rates in tech and less rejection rates in operations. You need to find out why we are having tech people reject our offers. Could it be that they want to work remotely? Could it be that we are not offering certain benefits? So linear interpretation of data is good, but you need to do comparative interpretation, which is comparative analysis. So let's move further. Let's look at the various types of analytics. 5 major types of analytics before we now get into the crux of the matter. The first is what we call descriptive analytics, all right? And descriptive analytics tells us what happened in the past. It answers the question, what happened in the past? It uses what? Historical data to summarize and analyze what already has occurred. So if you are looking at your sales figure, for example, and you're asking yourself, what was our sales trend for the past quarter? If we bring it home to hiring, and we start asking ourselves, how many people accepted our offers in the last quarter? How many people rejected our offers in the last quarter? That's descriptive analytics. You're asking, what happened? You're asking what happened? But it's not enough to stay there. You can now drill further, and it takes it a second level from descriptive analytics to diagnostic analytics. You know what happened, then you now ask the question, why is it happening? Why is it what? Why is it happening? So we're having a high rejection rate in quarter 3, but a less acceptance rate in quarter 3. What's going on? You now need to start asking those questions. Could it be that our employer brand is weak in the market? Could it be that our reviews on Glassdoor are showing that we're a toxic employer? Could it be that people are dragging us on social media? You need to drill down. If you now do a drill further, and maybe you are now looking at, okay, what were the best sources of getting top talent? And then maybe in quarter 3, you had a higher source from your social media channels, and you had less from your referrals. Then it tripled again in the next quarter. You had more from social media, and then referrals reduced all of a sudden to 0. You need to ask yourself questions. Is it that the employees no longer believe that they can refer people to work in the organization? On one hand, you need to ask why are our employees not referring. On the other hand, you also need to investigate why are social media numbers increasing. So descriptive analytics answers the question, what has happened in the past? Diagnostic analytics answers the question, why did it happen? So you need to probe further. Why did it happen? Why are we getting more candidates from LinkedIn and less candidates through employee referrals? And then if you check, if you begin to ask questions, you will get your answers. Like I said, your data does 3 things. It's either telling you a story, it's either you are gleaning insights, or it's showing you patterns. So if you are looking at your sales department, for example, you can be asking, why is sales declining in a particular region? Or even what factors are contributing to, customer churn? Or why is a particular product line underperforming? These are all examples of what? Diagnostic analytics. So we know what has happened in the past, then we're asking, why has it happened? Why has it happened? Then we'll go to predictive analytics. And this is one of my favorite aspects of analytics. You are now using historical data to do what? To predict future outcomes. But you are doing it with assistance. You are doing it with the aid of machine learning. You are doing it with the aid of AI, artificial intelligence, because they are algorithms. And if you understand how the algorithms work, you can actually use certain certain historical data points to predict outcomes. So take, for instance, you log in your data set, and then you realize that in the last 4 years, I'm using that as an example, you've had, on a quarter-upon-quarter basis, a high derailment rate. What's derailment rate? It's a metric some of us don't track. It's the number of employees who resign before their confirmation period. That means they don't clock their 6th month. And it's a metric we need to start checking. It's derailment rate. How many people resign before they clock 6 months of their own volition, meaning they don't want to stay in the organization? So if you track that, for example, in the last 4 years, if you take that data point, do you know that with the help of AI and machine learning, you can predict future outcomes? You can actually predict how many people will stay in your organization, new hires will stay in your organization beyond 6 months. You can predict the number, and then you can begin to ask yourself, what do we now need to start putting in place? Because it's all about using data to improve the entire candidate experience. So it's using automation, using technology tools to predict the outcome. As simple as a feedback from your interview process from a candidate, if you start analyzing that feedback over a period of time, you can use the data you get from that feedback. I remember I once interviewed with an international organization, and funny enough, I didn't make it. But after the interview, they sent me an evaluation. How was the interview process? Was it good? Do you think the number of time the interviewer spent was adequate? Blah, 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 blah. What were they doing? They were collecting data. So if the candidate said the interview time was inadequate and it was consistent over a period of time, what do you think they'll do with that data? They'll begin to rejig their processes. So you can use data to do a lot. You can use what? You can use data to do a lot. Then there is also what we call prescriptive analytics. Prescriptive analytics. It goes beyond predictive analytics, and we use it to recommend actions that can be taken to improve future outcomes. Just with the recent example I gave. So if you start checking all these points in your recruitment process, you realize that if you are taking feedback from the candidates and from other stakeholders, you can use it to enhance the entire hiring process. On that same form I filled, one of the questions they asked was, how warm were the interviewers? Were they hostile or were they warm? And if 50 candidates say their interviewers were hostile, that's data. That's what? That's data. That's valid data. It's telling two things. It's either the interviewers don't have interviewing skills. Am I communicating? So what would they do with that data? They'll use it to make decisions, to review the process, and possibly use it to go and retrain their hiring managers on interviewing skills. It was a very elaborate form. In fact, I found joy in filling that form. Yes, I didn't get the job, but that they could ask for feedback post the interview showed that they were doing something right. So the question we need to ask ourselves as colleagues is, do we get feedback from our candidates after interviews? Feedback is a two-way street. Yes, we give them feedback. Say, oh, we loved interacting with you. However, we're going to move on with another candidate. Fine. Fine aspect of the process. But do we ask them for their own feedback? Do we have a nicely designed form that gives you that each question is a data point when you get the feedback, when you get the responses? And then lastly, cognitive analytics. Very, 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 very interesting aspect of analytics, you know. And it's the most advanced type, you know. Of course, it's in its early stages of development, but cognitive analytics is a blend of both human, science, and every other thing to ensure that, hey, we're making the right hiring decision. So we have what? Descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, prescriptive, and cognitive analytics. In fact, I was talking to one of my friends. He's a researcher. And he said to me, every time he's conducting research, I said, how do you mean? He said, when I'm interacting with you, I'm observing you. As you're giving responses to certain things or you are sharing your information, I'm observing you. He said, I'm researching. He said, do you know that from the way people talk, from their mannerisms, you can see consistent patterns of behavior? And then he said to me, every opportunity to learn is an opportunity to research. I thought about that statement for a long time, and I realized that, hey, one of the things that will help us to really advance in the new world of work is being a sponge, keeping an open mind. We can't be rigid. We need to be agile. We need to be flexible. Now let's talk about some of the KPIs or metrics that we need to track. Tools and technologies. They know these things already. Applicant tracking systems, ATS, candidate sourcing platforms, skills assessment tools, predictive analytics softwares, job matching softwares, social media platforms. These are just some of the technological tools that can aid our hiring process. A lot of us have used ATS here, right? Applicant tracking systems. I want to believe. There are tools that can aid the hiring process. It's a technological tool. You will burden yourself if you were to go through 3,000 CVs on your own. It's not even realistic to do that today. But with an applicant tracking system, you can narrow down 3,000 applications using certain search parameters, certain criteria. You can narrow it down to 30. What of candidate sourcing platforms? Today, a lot of organizations give that service. Jobberman, they are a candidate sourcing platform. Workforce Group, they have candidate sourcing platforms. You can just tell them, this is the kind of candidate I want, and they use their platforms to source. If you don't want to use your ATS, they're tools. In as much as there's clarity in the description of what you want, you can always get your talent. How about skills assessment tools? A lot of organizations use a combination of both cognitive and behavioral assessment tools to test for the right candidates. Some people use predictive index. Some people use Thomas psychology assessment. Some use DISC assessment. All of that. They're all assessment tools. Then, of course, predictive analytics software. It can predict. You just put in your data points and it can predict. It can tell you, hey, this person will likely take your offer. this person will likely take it and resign further down the line. Because what is it doing? It's using past information to predict. Of course, error rates plus or minus 5%, but to a large extent, the level of precision and accuracy is high. Then, of course, job matching softwares, matching people's skills to the job descriptions. And then lastly, social media platforms. LinkedIn has become a major social media recruiting tool. There's the recruiter's beat. People use it. I use it. Just slide into people's DMs. You get a lot of passive candidates who might not be interested in a role, but after selling the role and the organization, you say, okay, let's even consider going through the hiring process. And what happens? A passive candidate becomes what? A top talent you hire tomorrow. So social media tools. Now let's look at some of the key metrics that we need to be focusing on. Now I just picked the major ones. I've dropped a link. You can see other ones, but I think these ones are very important. All right? And we're going to make this aspect very big. Now, forget what is on the screen. I have HR practitioners here. Teju, you're welcome. How are you? What other metric do you think is important that is not on the slide? We have time to hire, cost per hire, source quality, interview to offer ratio, quality of hire. I've talked about acceptance rates, rejection rates. What other metric is not there? Do you think we need to track as HR practitioners?
Cost per employee.
Cost per employee.
So you want to know how much it's costing you to keep an employee in the business.
Good. Cost per employee. What else? What other metric? What other key metric should we track? Yes, let's hear from Waimi. I'm going to use all my colleagues now. I've been doing all the talking, so let me make it more interactive. Okay. What other metric have we not tracked there?
Okay, so there's something I have started tracking, and what it does for me is that, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, what it does for me...
It's just that the other one is louder than this one.
What it does for me is it helps me assess the performance of my talent acquisition specialist. So it's similar to source quality. So what I do is I test, when the CV is coming, the recruiter does like a first stage shortlisting and then sends the CVs, the first stage shortlisting to the hiring manager to do a final shortlist of the people you want to invite for interview. So I analyze the percentage of CVs that my talent acquisition specialist forwarded to the hiring manager versus how many were invited for interview. So I'm testing your quality or the strength of your performance as a talent acquisition specialist. Because if you send on average 10 CVs to the hiring manager and only 2 or 3 get picked, then there's a problem.
There's a problem.
Yes. So that's something I started tracking.
So do you think it's a competence or knowledge gap or a skill gap?
It could be any of the above. So you now have to further engage because you hired that person for a reason. It could be maybe it's a skills gap in terms of they have a rough idea of the skill sets you're looking for. But maybe they haven't engaged their hiring manager well enough. There's one thing to say, okay, these are the general skill sets we need, but this hiring manager in particular, there are certain things that person is looking out for, right? So if you haven't engaged them properly, so for example, if you engage your hiring manager, you might know this person has a preference from people from certain industries. So in your shortlist, maybe you tilt towards that. And there's a reason why that hiring manager has that preference. It has to do with performance at the end of the day.
Let's give my earlier speakers a round of applause. Yes. Is there any other HR practitioner here? Are there metrics that we need to track? You want to give it a shot? Okay, so what do we call that metric? Have you given it a name now? Okay, please check and let's hear from you. What other metrics should we be tracking? Time to hire, cost per hire, source quality, interview offer ratio, quality of hire, cost per employee, acceptance rate, rejection rate. What else? Yes, HR metrics, yes. What other metrics should we be tracking? Revenue per employee, okay, yes, yes. Revenue per employee, what else? Then I talked about the derailment rate. There's a derailment rate as well. Number of employees who don't make it to the 6th month, who willingly leave the organization before the 6th month. It's called derailment rate. So it's something we need to track. What else? Interview churn rate, yes. Tell me about it.
The numbers of candidates you invite for interview, how many of them get to show up? How many of them did not show up?
Interview churn rate, yes. Rejections.
Rejections. That's the number of candidates that reject your offer letter.
Yeah, I've talked about it, rejection rate. There's also interview to offer ratio. How many people came through the interview? How many people did you give an offer? And then if you trickle down, if you think about it, please help me give out the mic. Give way me the mic. You see other metrics.
I just wanted to answer his question. So I had to check my email. I called it sourcing effectiveness.
Sourcing effectiveness.
That's the name I called the KPI.
Okay, maybe we need to tweak it because you are actually measuring the person doing the job.
So your own sourcing effectiveness. So we have something that measures source quality.
Yeah.
From different channels. That's
Yeah.
a separate KPI.
Yeah.
But this is the effectiveness of the talent acquisition specialist.
Okay. Source effectiveness.
Well, in terms of because you're shortlisting based on what you have sourced. But you're right, it might need to be tweaked. It's a new thing I just.
Yeah. We might need to tweak it. So, how then do we use data to enhance our hiring process? How do we use data to enhance our hiring process? What do we need to do? So first, we need to set goals. It's often good that we begin with the end in mind. Big picture thinking, big picture perspective. Begin with the end in mind. What is really the goal? What do you want to achieve? Do you want to achieve the fact that you are getting quality talent or you're after quantity talent? It's very important. Sorry, it may not be grammatically correct, but I'm sure you get the gist. Is the goal quality talent or quantity talent? Is the goal quality of talent or quantity of talent? Your goal must be clear. Now, if the goal is clear, you need to use a variety of data sources. Don't just rely on one data source to make decisions. And let me take it further. Don't also look at one metric, which is I often encourage HR practitioners, create your own personalized dashboard of hiring metrics and general HR metrics that you are tracking. If you have created your dashboard will be telling you a story. Don't forget I said there are three major things in data. There are stories, there are insights, and there are patterns. SIP. Stories, insights, and patterns. You will see them. If you investigate any data set thoroughly, you will see those three things. It's telling a story, there are insights, and there are patterns. So create your dashboard. Why did I start tracking derailment rates? I once worked for an organization, and when we checked the turnover rate for that year, we had about 45% of the total employee population leave. But that was not the story. When I drilled down further, when we now checked employment date, exit date, tenure, that was where it hit me that all the people who left that year, 75% of them who left before their 6th month. So it told me a story. It showed me a pattern. And then I asked my team, go get me the exit interview forms of these people. When I drilled it further, it gave me further insights. So on my own, I started, anywhere I work now, I track derailment rates. It's a metric I created for myself to track. And what did I do with that information? We had to rewrite the entire recruitment policy for the organization. Because the insights from the exit interview form of those 75% who left before 6 months, they were telling us something about the organization. So create your own dashboard. You can personalize the metrics to your team, to your organization, but create your own dashboard. Begin to track. Then be consistent. Track your metrics regularly, maybe on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis. That's fine. Analyze your data. I've talked about that extensively. As you investigate and analyze your data, you will see those 3 things I mentioned. Then use data to identify qualified candidates. How many minutes more? We'll use it to take questions and interact. Let me close by sharing with you some of the benefits of data-driven hiring. First, it improves hiring quality. If you create your dashboards and you are consistently measuring your data either on a monthly, quarterly, biannually, or annually basis, depending on whichever time frame is convenient for you, you will get information that will help you enhance your hiring process. And inevitably, it will impact on the quality of people you are hiring. If you check source quality, for example, if you measure all the sources where you get candidates from, it will tell you where you are getting more candidates from and how you can optimize such source. True or false? And then if you now do that, it helps you to see how you can get more quality candidates from that source. If, for example, employee referrals has been your major source of getting top talent into the organization, you may now want to ask yourself, if there's no referral bonus, do you think putting in place a referral bonus will be a way of strengthening employee referrals? So you can use your data to improve the quality of hires, to also improve the process. Then, of course, it reduces bias because, truth be told, there is a little element of bias in the process. We all have our biases. I tell you the truth, I have mine. All right? So if I notice you left a federal government college, I connect with you, I went to a unity school. That's a bias. We all have them. I don't want to mention them. There's a particular school, I don't want to mention their name. Once they see their people, they just turn a blind eye straight. You are laughing. You know this school. Eh? Who are you? So it reduces bias. Then, of course, it increases efficiency. And lastly, it saves cost, really. It saves cost. So data is very important. We need to not only gather data, but we need to analyze, we need to investigate that data so that we can ask ourselves, what stories is this data set telling us? Then we can ask ourselves, what insights can we draw? And then what patterns? Coming back to that example, and I want to close with that so that we can take questions and general comments. When we now discovered the root cause of why people were leaving the organization before the end of the 6 months, it was traced to a particular individual who was toxic. It was traced to what? Just a particular individual. So I did a report, put the report together and all of that, had the original copies of the exit interviews. So I went to see my boss, the CEO, and I said, we need to do something about XYZ individual. And I knew that my CEO was favorably disposed to that individual. So I said to him, I said, Wale, this is not an emotional conversation. There is data to back it up. And I took him through the several levels of investigation that led us to that conclusion. I said, first, in the year 2016, we had so number of attrition, which was 75% of the employee population. He said, and so. I said, when we drilled further by tenure in the organization, among that set, XYZ people left before their 6 months. He said, it's becoming interesting. I said, it's interesting. So I said, when we took the exit interview forms and we analyzed the reasons, these are the forms for your perusal, you will discover they mentioned XYZ person's toxic behavior. So I said, Mike, give me 15 minutes to run through. And in my presence, he was running through the exit interview forms. Then he said to me, what do we do? I said, the decision is in your court. He said, what's your recommendation? I said, will you be willing to bite the balls? He said, what am I saying? I said, it's either you ask him to go or he goes on a behavioral change intervention program. And what made it a tough decision was because he was a top revenue contributor for the organization. So I said, what are you going to do? He said, okay, let's try option B. Let's send him on an intervention program. I said, what if he comes back and there's no change in behavior 90 days? Will you be willing to lose the revenue that comes from this place? Because he was going to go with that revenue line. So he asked me, what do I said? Let's begin to get people to job shadow. Let's begin to put succession in place and all of that. And then let's get another person within the same space who is as equally good as he is, and let's throw up a challenge. So data. We just need to investigate the data. If you investigate the data, the stories will be there. And the data will not lie because you've collected it. So you can use data to make effective and objective decisions. It can enhance the quality of your hiring decisions. Recently now, where I work, there's something I'm trying to introduce. And I'm trying to say to our talent acquisition team, beyond just asking people to sit in interviews, when we follow up with them, we need to ask them a fundamental question. If they don't get an offer, will they be willing to refer the organization to other people to apply? I'm trying to create a metric. I've not given it a name, but I'm trying to create a metric to test the strength of the employer brand. That I did not get a role, but I'll be more than happy to recommend someone to go through your recruitment process. I've not given it a name. Maybe I'm sure I'll come up with a name.
You can call it Rejected Candidate MPS. So that's RCMPS. So I'll send you my invoice.
Let's give him a round of applause. So in closing, let's use data. Data is powerful. Data is what? Data is powerful. The data sets don't lie. And when it comes to getting business leaders on board, it's all about the data. It's all about the what? It's all about the data. And thank you. Rejected candidate net promoter score. I think I'm going to actively get my team to work on that. But the truth is we can use data to enhance our hiring process, and we can use it in general to enhance our entire HR processes and make the best of decisions. Thank you so much. I'll be more than happy to take questions if there are, or contributions from our colleagues sitting in the room. Questions, contributions? Questions, contributions? Or I'll just pass the mic around the room and maybe people can share their light bulb moments. How many minutes do I have left? 10. So maybe people can share their light bulb moments. Key insights or key lessons you have gleaned. Let's start with our friend here, if there are no questions. So it's like we're relearning, we're summarizing, yes. So just pass the mic. We'll pass the mic around. Key learnings that you have picked. Yes.
Okay, like you said, SIP, stories, insights, patterns. For every decision you have to take, there's a data to back it up. I think that's...
Thank you so much.
Okay, so one of my key learnings today was a metric that I never knew can be measured. That's what she was talking about, having to measure the quality of a candidate that actually passed through to the interview process. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So one of my important points I took was your invention. What you said, that you said you should
Yeah.
it's a very good innovative because you could also know the way people even view your workplace. Thank you.
So, key learnings. If there are no questions, we'll use that to wrap up the session. Yes.
Okay, I think I took the derailment.
Metric.
Yes, that was good. So I have a question.
Okay.
Right. How do you track or how do you foolproof data? For instance, I'll give you a scenario. If you, let's say, send out a survey to maybe a particular branch of the organization and all the feedback about the line manager, none is good. Though everyone around the organization would say, oh, this person is amazing, or this person cannot be like that, or you understand the firmness of the line manager, which is required, let's say, for the kind of business they do. So when you look at such data, how do you measure sincerity, or how do you ensure that there's no collaboration? Oh, we are surveying this guy, let's ensure that, let's bring this person down. This happens. So how do we drill for that? How do we ensure that we get the right feedback?
Okay, so I'll talk as a researcher now. Okay. There's something about reliability and validity of your research instruments, all right? But beyond that, in statistics, there are inferential points that you need to pay attention to. Once a certain particular data set is moving forward towards a particular point, there's a problem. That's why in research, you have what you call your polar questions. You must always have them in any data set. Polar questions are same but asked in opposite terms. So if I asked a question A, if the answer must be affirmative and I ask B, the polar question must be negative. Now, if the answers on both polar questions are affirmative, there's a problem somewhere. That's why in designing your research instruments, you must put in polar questions to deal with issues like this. So if I say, is Kunle kind? And then I ask the flip side, is he nauseating? I'm just using that as an example. And your answers are both affirmative, there's a problem because they are polar questions. They are twin-like questions. Now, when you see that, the other way of foolproofing is revalidating your data with other external means, like focus group discussions and all of that. All right? And that's where you now need to create a safe space for people to speak up. I'll give you an example. A few months back, I was on an organizational culture transformation project. All right? It's one of my area of strengths in HR. And then we released a survey on a particular executive director in the organization. Everybody said the same thing, despite the fact that there were polar questions in the survey. And I said to them, I said, they are not telling the truth. So I told the HR manager, we're going to have focus group discussions to revalidate XYZ information we've gotten. And I said to him, I said, give me people who are credible, objective, courageous, and will not be afraid to speak up. We will take them to a hotel. We'll lodge them 2 nights. First night, we're not doing anything. They'll just enjoy themselves. The following day, we'll have those sessions. And guess what? At those focus group sessions, the truth came out. And the truth was at variance with what we got on the survey. Because you see, in research, it's either the null hypothesis or it's the alternative hypothesis. It can't be the same. All right? It's either there is a relationship or there is no relationship. You know, when we do research, we write our hypothesis. All right? We would draft our research questions and all of that. In fact, as a researcher, one of the things I started doing is using forced ranking skills to get people to talk. Because most often times, people use your middle skills to not even talk. So I've stopped using your 5-point skills in my research. I sparingly use it, all right? It's either you strongly agree, you strongly disagree, or you disagree, because people use the indifferent or maybe to hide. And most often times, when you're analyzing the data, the bulk of the people have gone to sit on indifferent. And there are unwritten rules in research that where you have more people who are indifferent, they tilt towards the greater value. So if you have more people who were indifferent, but the people who said yes are greater than the people who said no, they're actually saying yes. So it comes back to the methodology and then the instruments. But beyond that, where you see those things, you must revalidate your data sets. Does that make sense? How many minutes do I have left? 3. Okay, so let's take his.
Okay, so being that I run a technology company for HRs, I think I've learned a couple of metrics that would help us provide more information going forward. So thank you. Well done.
Okay, I came pretty late, but I think one of the things that I caught was build your own report, which basically speaks to the fact that the intent needs to be there.
Yeah.
Right? You need to, first of all, have a vision of where you want to be, and then you set the parameters for the information you want to receive.
True.
I hope that was clear.
Yeah.
So I think it just reaffirms that we need to be specific, we need to be deliberate about the behavior we want to see. So that will help us in setting the reports that we want to track.
Thank you so much. So let me take one from that table and one from this table, and then we'll wrap up the session. So let's take that lady and this gentleman.
So I had a question which you've already responded to, which I am not a HR person, but it was interesting, the example you gave about derailment. And you already responded, because I was going to ask, how do you encourage sincerity when you are running those kind of interviews? And you've mentioned focus groups, so that was a very good one that I learned, so thank you.
So apart from being a HR practitioner, I'm a researcher. I have a PhD, so I do research a lot. You'll find me in research atmospheres asking questions and all of that. Yes?
Okay, so it was creating your own
dashboard.
So back to what she said, I had a situation recently where we're hiring for a role, we have the job description, but over time, you shortlist and you feel these are good CVs, and the hiring manager tells you it doesn't cut it. So at a point, I had to ask, I think that has happened on 2 occasions. I asked, please, what exactly are you looking for? So for me, it is that creating your own dashboard. So you get to bring out something related to that. So what level do I understand the, the request?
All right, yes. We'll take where Amy, since she raised the hand, and then we'll wrap up, because I have to run now.
So I just wanted to speak a bit more. Thank you for your comments to what he said. The reason I introduced that metric, I had a light bulb moment when you were speaking.
Wow.
Yes, and the reason I introduced that metric was primarily to inspire and track performance, right? So until this session, I hadn't thought of it as more than just a metric, but I'm now thinking of it in terms of so what can I do? So over time, I'm now thinking, okay, beyond assessing, performance, like I said, what else can I get from that data? So, for example, if it's a certain set of people that keep rejecting CVs that are sent to them, maybe that tells a story. Or if it's for certain roles or certain levels. So I'm now starting to think beyond just using that as a metric and how perhaps it might show insight. But it's been very helpful for me, and I liked hearing what he said, because the reason I introduced it is I wanted to inspire my talent acquisition person to think strategically and be intentional and not just hide behind the tool. I've posted it on LinkedIn, and then whatever comes in, comes in. So, yeah, I just wanted to say that.
All right. Thank you so much. It's been nice interacting with us, and let me hand over back to Emmanuel. Emmanuel, thank you so much, and thanks to the organizers, TechPoint Africa, for having me, and I wish us all the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Please, you can do better than that, please. Give a round of applause for Dr. Michael Ogo. That was a really, really amazing session. I think we can all agree that we had some really, really insightful moments.